The Carolina Panthers went 15-1 and went to the Super Bowl in 2015, but then had a terrible downfall in 2016 simply because Dave Gettleman decided not to re-sign Josh Norman and franchise tagged him and lifted the franchise and got rid of him completely without getting anything in return. And that's why Marty Hurney, who is clearly the GM who actually built the team that drafted all those players except for Kawan Short and brought all those players in that were stars. Unlike Gettleman, who all he brought in was Kawan Short. Good defensive tackle, but at the same time, though, it was really Marty Hurney who did that. Now, when I look at the Panthers, they're in a division where any of those teams in the NFC South can make the playoffs. Yes, and I don't find the schedule specifically for the Panthers not very hard, simply because they are facing the AFC East, and really that's against New England Patriots. And then they face the NFC North, which has the Packers, which is an interesting one. They're just inconsistent. Vikings are a little bit of an unknown. I'm still wondering if they can still offensively produce. I think when I look at Sam Bradford, I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I think he's better than Alex Smith, so he's kind of in the middle of the pack. But at the same time, though, they really don't have many offensive weapons there. And then Detroit, I mean, it's Matt Stafford running the whole thing. But other than that, though, there's not really much to watch except for Ezekiel Ansah and Darius Slay. And then the Bears are kind of in a resetting mode with John Fox as their coach. So I look at this, their schedule's not too difficult. They also face the 49ers at one point. So I don't look at this schedule and think to themselves that it's nothing too difficult. I definitely think they can recover from this because really the Panthers have a lot of talent on the roster. A lot of people look at last season, and obviously last season was a disaster for them, but you do have Cam Newton on offense, and he was an MVP at one point, and he does have a lot of ability right there, and he's still fairly in his youth. He's in his mid to late 20s, so you got someone right there. You also got Christian McCaffrey, who I think is going to be real good. Him and Joe Mixon, I thought, were the two best running backs coming out of college. I really like their games just because it really transcends to the pro style of the game. Also, I look at their defense and think to themselves, well, they got Thomas Davis, who's a stud, Luke Kuechly, who's a stud, Quan Short, who's a stud. So the studs are there on defense, but obviously you need to have a complete team. Overall, I think a successful season for the Panthers would be getting into the playoffs, because I honestly believe that any of these teams in the NFC South should make the playoffs. So any team that misses the playoffs in the NFC South underachieves, but any teams that, well, maybe except for the Saints, but any team that makes it to the playoffs in the NFC South achieves their goal. If they win a Super Bowl or get to a Super Bowl, I think that would be overachievement right there. But when I look at the Panthers, I definitely think that they have the possibility. Now, their head coach, Ron Rivera, I am not a Ron Rivera guy. I think he's not very good, to be honest. He's a defensive mind that I'm not very impressed by, really. He doesn't really comes off of that, and the only thing on his resume is he played for the '85 Bears. Nothing too impressive, but that's the only thing I really see from him. Also, their quarterback position is a little bit interesting. They got this Bradbury guy who they believe drafted in the second or the first round, but overall they have something there. And they also signed Matt Khalil from the Minnesota Vikings to bring them a tackle play, because they did lose Michael Orr, who ended up went from having a movie based off of him to him beating up an Uber driver. So obviously a lot of things have changed. Now, when I look at the Carolina Panthers, I look at how Cam Newton, I really feel as if he can return. Now, I've been a big supporter of Cam Newton. I do kind of like how he plays. I really like how he styles of plays. But there are some things I look at his personality, which I'm yay and nay about. I think yay-wise, I think he's a self-made guy. He really figured out things on his own. And I think there are times where he does look like a confident quarterback. But obviously there's times where he doesn't look confident. Cough, cough, Super Bowl 50, cough, cough. He did not look good whatsoever in that game. And he did not look like he was playing. And I don't like his whiny little attitude about how he doesn't like the idea of him being in the how he felt as if that he's getting hit too much. And I feel like if you're going to the media, you're complaining about how much you get hit. I mean, you're kind of acting like a bitch there. And I also don't really appreciate that because I don't really see quarterbacks whine for how many times he gets hit. And listen, look, Cam Newton's been hit a lot in his career. He's been hit over 900 times, but please, come on, Cam. Don't whine about it. At least out of all things, you don't have to like it. I'm not forcing you to like it. I'm not like sadistic, be like, oh, I enjoyed this, Cam. You should enjoy this too. Ooh. But overall, I don't think that it's something I look at and think to myself that, well, you should not be whining about it. Don't complain to the media. But overall, I think it's self-made. I do see leadership in the guy. I think he could go from somewhere because for a mobile quarterback, and a lot of mobile quarterbacks struggle to be pocket passers, but he's out of all mobile quarterbacks I've seen, he's been the most successful pocket passer. I look at Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, I would say, he's been making steps into the right direction. I think I saw some plays from him over the past couple of years where he does do it. He doesn't consistently do it enough to have faith with him, and I think you definitely do need to have the pocket presence right there in the NFL. I don't think you could just run around all over the place because you really don't need to run around the NFL to make a play. Sometimes you do, don't get me wrong, but it's not a dire need because the defensive backs are, I think for the most part, are usually scared to touch the receiver at all, and the receivers can touch them as much as they want, which doesn't really make any sense for how defense is the physical game, yet they can't touch the wide receivers whatsoever. So I don't really think the mobility part's there. But overall, when I look at Cam Newton, there's some ups and downs with him, yays and nays about him. I think that I look at him and I think he almost wants to play as if he's Tom Brady, which I kind of understand. And he holds high expectations as if he's Tom Brady, which to a certain degree, if he thinks he's supposed to be really good, like he should be, he should do that, and I do appreciate it. But at the same time, he does have the mobility. Tom Brady is the sloth of quarterbacks, as I said in my last couple videos, but he's one of these guys that he just wants to stay in the pocket and just chuck the ball, kind of similar to Tom Brady. But he has that ability where he could be an Aaron Rodgers too. I think Cam Newton could be, if he gets a little bit of his personality, I think he needs to be he needs to change his personality a little bit. And I'm not saying that he has to be a sociopath or anything, but he needs to tweak himself. I think he needs to kind of be a little bit less whiny, be a little less pouty, because he's one of the poutiest quarterbacks I've seen. And I think he just needs to cut that out. But he can be, ability-wise, a Tom Brady and an Aaron Rodgers. And that's very, very impressive because if you look at how he plays, he has that thing where he can sit back and throw footballs all over the place, but also he has the mobility to scramble around. And I've seen Cam Newton scramble, and he's really good at it. He's not just some sort of flat-out runner as if Colin Kaepernick is. He's not just a scrambler in Aaron Rodgers, and obviously nothing against scrambling. Obviously, it's very important, but he can do both. There's a lot of talent there with them. And ideally, I don't think Cam Newton has had a lot of help when it comes to his coaching staff. I think his coaching staff really isn't that impressive. I'm not impressed whatsoever by it, and I definitely feel as if that, I'm not saying he is deprived of having talent around him, because he's had studs around him. There was a point of time where he had the best linebacking core in the league, he had the best pass rushing D tackle, he had the best offensive pass blocking offensive line. He's had one of the best tight ends, and that's just how it works. So he hasn't been deprived in his career, but overall he's only had one season of it. And I definitely look at him and think to myself, he definitely has the measurables, but he definitely has to play it back. But he wants to play more like Tom Brady. They're going to that direction where he can. They got Christian McCaffrey, who can play in the slot, who can be used as a receiving back, where he could just chuck the ball out. And that's what he wants to do. He wants to do that. He doesn't want to be like Aaron Rodgers with his mobility, but he wants to kind of move around and just want to sit back in the pocket, comb his hair, like one of my favorite Ike Taylor lines, and just kind of throw it right there. And when I look at that, I really think that Cam Newton, I understand from his standpoint. However, I just think he needs to step up. And with the idea about Marty Hurney coming back in, I think it's a smart move. It's only a Durham GM, so they might get some guy to be assistant under Marty to go from there. So they're just going to see how it is. And I think Cam Newton can make strides to do it. I do, but it's really with the Carolina Panthers, it's not so much of the talent. Even though Dave Gettleman screwed up the team, there's enough talent there to succeed, and not only that, I think it's really the players themselves have to step up, and mostly it's Cam Newton, because I expect much more from Cam Newton, and he had a disappointing 2016. But obviously, I think it's quite easily he could rebound and he could become one of the future elite quarterbacks in the league. Alright guys, my last video was on how Roger Goodell got an extension. Yuck.